The elections have created a huge amount of chaos in all kinds of different ways for all kinds of different people. And people are really afraid of getting their paychecks. They're afraid of seniors are getting afraid of not getting Social Security. I mean, there's a lot of fear out there too. We never took a break from COVID to step into this really chaotic kind of inflection point.
Welcome to Organized Chaos, the show about all things organizations. On today's episode, the inaugural episode, we will be discussing the new workplace, redefining culture, collaboration, and performance. My panelists today, and I'm really excited. We are so lucky that we were able to secure these two panelists. They are very busy. They took time out of their busy schedules to support our podcast. He is the founder and principal consultant of Coaching Imperative, a consultancy that specializes in emotional intelligence and many other things, Dr. Isaac Carter. She is the retired professor of human behavior at the University of Southern California, founder of We Will Inc., the recently retired, and as far as I'm concerned, all-knowing Dr. Laree Kiely. I feel like I want the, hopefully we can add some clapping in the background. That'd be great.
We can do that.
Okay. So before we dive in, you two, I'd really just want to take a second, since it is the inaugural episode, to sort of introduce the show to our guests and let them know really what to expect. I am a self-professed organization geek and organization development practitioner, researcher, although I don't do as much research as I like now. But this really is just an opportunity to engage folks that are a lot smarter than I am on a lot of topics related to organizational life. One of the things that really stands out to me right now is that we are living in a time of rapid change, increased complexity, shifting expectations, increased division and conflict in organizational life. And in my view, the implications of this on leadership, on management, on just the overall organizational experience are quite profound. And so when you tune into Organized Chaos, we are going to hopefully engage in discussions that really talk about all of these topics. So on today's episode, we really want to spend some time talking about how the workplace really evolved after the pandemic. And we'll get into it specifically a little bit later, but I just want to take a second and say, I don't know about you two, but I feel like there sort of was the world of work pre-pandemic, and then COVID hit, and as organizations tried to adapt to that, there are some changes that were permanent, really. Even though some organizations are trying to go back to pre-COVID, I think it's clear from my perspective that a lot of these sort of relics from post-COVID, some of these changes are here to stay. So that being said, from things like labor market disruption right from the pandemic, you had folks sort of like take a second to reevaluate like what their priorities were in life. You had the Great Resignation where folks were sort of leaving their jobs and looking for opportunities that sort of better fit their life or their desires, or even not working at all, which actually one of the things about that was I was really wondering how all these people that sort of like quit their job paid their bills. Maybe we could talk about that a little bit later, but that was certainly a pretty significant shift that organizations had to deal with. Of course, we had remote work, hybrid work, which is still here today. And then also another big change was mental health, I feel like sort of was prioritized for the first time in my lifetime that I had ever seen. And it was really sort of like destigmatized. And so those are a couple of changes that I noticed, but I wanted to sort of just begin by, what changes did you all notice, especially in sort of the world of consulting and as you interacted and worked with clients? And I will throw that to either of you.
Isaac, you want to go? I'll.
No, I was raised a certain way, so I'm going to please indulge me. If my mom sees this,
Gentlemen, they still
she will be
exist.
mad
This
at
is
she
so
will be mad at
great.
me.
Thank you. Okay, well, and on top of that, and to Jeremy, you really captured it. And Jeremy, and on top of everything else that you do in terms of the researcher and the geek about all of this and so on, is you're also a practitioner. So you work right, you've got your foot right in that door and you're seeing it happen real time. COVID, we never had a break from it. We've had so many inflection points. Inflection points usually happen one at a time, like a recession or something like that. We've got probably 10 different inflection points simultaneously. And we never got a break from COVID before we went into some of the others. I mean, there are weather disasters and all of those kinds of things. There's the elections have created a huge amount of chaos in all kinds of different ways for all kinds of different people. And people are really afraid of getting their paychecks. They're afraid of seniors are getting afraid of not getting Social Security. I mean, there's a lot of fear out there too. We never took a break from COVID to step into this really chaotic kind of inflection points. And now we've also normalized conflict, which is now it's role modeled for us to have conflict. So these are things that are escalating. One of the things that I have seen that I think is really important is that when you hit an inflection point, almost all of the study that went up until that point is now irrelevant.
Mm.
I mean, take a look at the business books on your shelf, and there are only one or two that are still relevant because they were generic enough or leadership-esque enough that they still fit, but everything else is kind of out the window. And I taught executive MBAs for years, and they would never tolerate an article right now. They wouldn't tolerate an article that was published before 2021. So we're up for grabs because we don't know how to navigate all of this. We haven't been there before, and there are many things that we're trying to navigate at once. One of the things that I have noticed, and then we'll get into this deeper, and I'll give it to Isaac because I'm a gentle woman as well. But is that, that whole thing, you were making this list of people who are leaving their jobs and all of that kind of thing. We also had the phenomenon of quitting and staying. Now, people basically emotionally and every other way quit, but they stayed in their jobs, which was really bad because we couldn't replace them. Now I'm noticing that the next step beyond that is now they're pushing back. And I'm seeing a lot of pushback from employees up the line. And that's been kind of interesting because for leadership, they're not really quite used to managing and handling and leading through pushback that is as strong as this. So it's a whole
Mhm.
new leadership strategy too, and it's kind of unknown. And having power over people never really was very effective in the first place. Nobody really liked it, but on the other hand, it sort of worked a little bit. Now it doesn't even work. So we've got a whole new ball game. So I tossed that. Speaking of ball games, I'll toss the ball to you, Isaac.
Yeah, from my perspective, there's a number of things you already mentioned with the recession and emotional health. I would add to that this whole global epidemic of loneliness, and we saw in the Gallup polls how we had, globally has worker engagement decreased to all-time lows. And I think that COVID also allowed for different generations to be in closer proximity to each other. And that proximity has created some cultural tensions. And I just say it for myself in the sense of, I worked with the idea like you work hard and you work harder, you work harder, you work harder. That was it. My sons, that is not their stick. And they have a language now to talk about it. I think, Laree, to your point, to push back with. They can talk about their emotional health
Yeah,
and they can talk about how they're going to feel passion and work and feel valued. And leaders were struggling. A lot of leaders struggle with that idea because the top down was, you know, the leadership du jour for a long time.
Yeah.
And now we're getting into more complexity or with these intergenerational work teams, hybrid workforces, and people having time at home got a chance to reflect on what they want out of their lives, what they want out of their values, what they want to see in their futures, and they bringing that to the workplace. And they almost have an expectation that the workplace should help fill some of these things where that was
right,
never my thought pattern. Like work is
right,
work and home is home, but that has been blended to the point that it's created some more complexity for leaders to deal with, organizations to navigate.
right. I
Yeah.
heard a fellow say the other day the two most dangerous things on the planet are global warming and human isolation.
Yeah.
It's to your point.
Hmm.
And to your point, I mean, people may be in the same place even at the same time, but they're really not interacting
Yes.
too. So that's another inflection point is we've got all this technology that separates us in a
Very
lot of ways.
true.
Connects us and separates us at the same
At the
time.
same time, yeah.
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 Yeah, I was having a conversation the other day and I was talking about how one of the greatest ironies in the world to me right now is how, humans have more technology and the ability to access all the information pretty much in the world or be connected with folks sort of throughout the world. But we've never also been, I would argue, more disconnected at the same time.
Mhm.
Laree, you and I have had conversations about the workers sort of in this environment, workers having the upper hand, right? And you sort of alluded to that in ways that folks are sort of like pushing back against leadership, against management. What are a couple of ways that you've noticed that folks are really starting to push back against the organization, if you will, or against management when we're working with clients?
Well, I don't want to oversimplify, but it is also somewhat generational, and we have more generations in this in the workplace today than ever before, and we're different because so many things happen between generations that it makes us more different than it used to. I'm seeing it push back just what you're talking about. They have language for it now, and when they don't feel good or they don't feel heard or something, they'll speak up and say, "I don't, I need to be seen. I need to be heard." I don't have a problem with that. I think that's really good. I think, somebody like Isaac, the people that you coach and what you're coaching them on is to listen to people is one thing. I mean, that's a fairly big deal. The other kind of, and the pushback just around, no, I don't want to do that. I'm hearing that. It's like, what do you mean you don't want to do that? But I think the thing that the one that I'm seeing probably that is the most interesting and dynamic is the pushback of people who are working in an organization, but they're not working toward the mission. In fact, they disagree with the mission of the organization, and yet they're working in that organization. I'm seeing a lot of that. And I think I'm not quite sure what to do with that because, first of all, we want to free people up to find their groove, right? Find what you want to do and what matters to you, and so on and so forth, and make sure you find a job where you can express that. That's the beauty of it. But I'm seeing people push back against the mission of an organization. Like I have one organization, I can't tell you who it is, but that got huge diversity and inclusion and equity. It's a big deal in that organization. They were living and breathing all of that. And then they called because they were a government organization, they just got called on that and told not to do that anymore. And in fact, right now they're shut down. And they were told not to do that anymore. And the people that they had hired, who were extremely diverse, pushed back on that. Said, "Well, you can't just bow to this. You have to fight back." And the CEO said, "I can't fight back. We have to adapt because we have to stay alive, and we have to fulfill our mission." And they said, "Well, but you have to push back on this. You have to include all this stuff about inclusion and diversity and equity." And she said, "If I do that, they're going to put us out of business. They're going to fire all of us." And that's a really tough spot to be in. And I thought for a while that was only going to be government workers, but it's actually spreading now a lot. It's spreading into healthcare. It's spreading into a lot of other industries where people are not fulfilling the mission. And all I can think about from my perspective is if you don't believe in the mission, then find a job whose mission you do agree with. That's number one.
Yeah.
Or change the mission. Maybe the mission needs to be changed. But I've seen an awful lot of pushback on what is demanded of organizations and also what is demanded from their workforce. That makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, and
Yeah.
just sort of being in practice, right? This is something that I see quite often. Um, and it's really interesting, like from my perspective, because you can read like some research that will say, particularly like with younger workers, one of the things that they're looking for really is like their own personal values fit right, like with the organizational mission. So we
Yeah.
have that happening, but then in practice, again, you also see a lot of what you're saying, pushing back against the mission as well, or requiring that the mission be changed. It's really interesting times.
Yeah.
Isaac, what say you?
Uh, I say ditto to what has been said. Um, and then one of the things I try to work with my clients on, especially around the inclusion, equity, diversity, belonging, is that I was a leader in terms of I've taken before I became a coach and consultant. I didn't do that until after a 25-year career, and I never had to say diversity, equity, or inclusion at any time in my life because I just value those things, and so it showed up in my work. I think one of the things that's complicated this current iteration of what this means for us is that we've professionalized DEI to the point it got compartmentalized, then it could become attacked. If
Mm.
it remained integrated in your leadership philosophy or organizational philosophy without giving it labels, there's no way to identify it. You just hire diverse, you promote people, give people equal opportunities, and you can build inclusion and belonging. But when you start professionalizing and naming it, it gives people the ability to critique it. And in many cases, I would say there was a Dunning-Kruger effect that people may have gotten some certifications or some kind of information about DI, but they were asked to talk about it and speak about it in a very complex way. And it was beyond where they were at in their own leadership practice,
Yeah.
which did not help the tensions around it and the complexity around it. And I can say the person here who lives in Florida and who saw things happen, I would say a couple of years before how the world is in the United States is seeing it happen now, is some of the legislation that got presented has gotten taken back, and the courts have said no. A private business gets the opportunity to say what its values are, and it gets the opportunity to say what the training needs to be successful. But the echo of it is in everything because people are afraid to
Yeah.
get in trouble, and that fear, I think, is one of the most complex things we have to navigate in this
Yeah.
time for leaders. Is the fear of like, how do I lead effectively without one bringing the eye of the federal state government to me, at the same time supporting my workforce and the communities I'm in to continue to provide the level of service or goods they provide.
That's a brilliant point. That's a brilliant point. The whole business of I ran into somebody the other day and said, "Well, what do we do with our DEI division?" I said, "Call it something else."
Mm-hmm.
And I think I absolutely agree with you. It's a brilliant way to put it. Now we've institutionalized the words. We'll change the words. Call it Bob if you want to. I don't care what you call it.
Exactly.
Just practice it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's nice.
A- Absolutely. And so I actually spent quite a lot of time like thinking about um, DEI and sort of the politicization. I don't know why I've been struggling with that word lately, but DEI has become politicized. And I think that that's sort of like really unfortunate in the sense that Laree, you and I have had conversations again where you're the point you always make is listen, each of us is as unique as our fingerprint, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I say that because there's sort of this politicized version of DEI, but then there's like the reality on the ground for practitioners like myself when it's like we have all of this diversity, right? Again, and we have to sort of take all of this, all of these diverse backgrounds and identities and skills and wants and desires and everything and really harness them to achieve organizational goals. So in many ways, I sort of feel like just with the fact that DEI became politicized, that it one doesn't really take away from sort of the mission, if you will, for practitioners that are like, hey, I still sort of have all of this and all of this difference, and we still need to accomplish this goal. But it creates it contributes to the organizational conflict in many ways, right? Because then you have folks that are like, oh, is this, DEI or woke or whatever, when really all it is, hey, listen, like we're just trying to help you develop some skills to become more effective at working across difference. And so
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
if either of you have any thoughts on that. Or am I crazy? You both are smarter than me, but am I
No.
crazy? Am I tripping?
Well, you're
Yeah.
crazy good. You're a good crazy. Yeah, I'm a fanatic about treating individuals the way they need to be treated, and I teach by bumper stickers. Isaac, I apologize. I teach by bumper
Oh
stickers.
no, you make
Sort
it
of like
palatable.
I think
Making
we
it
need to
palatable.
treat people equally, but we don't have to
Mm-hmm.
treat them the same. Now
Mm-hmm.
that's a funny balance to try to strike, but I mean, there's a wonderful tool out that you can get on the internet now, and I can't tell you the resource, but you can find it on the line called appreciation languages. There
Hmm.
was a love languages, there's appreciation languages where you can hand this to your staff and say, fill this out and tell me what's your appreciation language? How do I show you that I appreciate you in a way that is meaningful to you? I mean, that treats everybody as individuals. And, even the institutionalizing of DEI, I think to your point, ended up unintentionally in some ways being stereotyping,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And that's the opposite of what we want. And so, in order to not stereotype, we should just try to figure out who these individuals are.
Hmm.
And, I'm a fan of servant leadership. I mean, our job is to help people do their jobs in a way that they feel fulfilled and that the work gets done.
Definitely.
And that would be different for different people, but we have to treat them equally. I think we've
Hmm.
kind of been failing at all of those things for a while, but I think going back to just looking at the fact that we are all individually different and come with our own talents and gifts and experiences and traumas, and I mean, you name it, and not overdo it, but allow it and have these kinds of conversations with folks about who are you? What do you want? We've got a whole program that we do now on helping leaders and managers with development coaching. Who do they want to be
Hmm.
if they look 3 and 5 years down the road, which is a wonderful conversation between a leader and their staff or their employee, because who do you want to be? What fulfills you? What's making you happy? What's your favorite part of the job? All those kinds of things, because there will be some similarities, but there will be a lot of differences.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the challenge is also around that. I think in the DEI bubble that was created, where all this research was done, looking at companies, their outcomes, and it became very clear that more diverse organizations outperform their competitors.
Yeah, yeah,
And that at CEO level, having diversity help better decision making, retention, engagement. And the DEI anti DEI discussion doesn't reference those things. And I try to remind people those things are still true.
yeah,
They're still true, even if you can't say the words. They're still true.
yeah,
And so, why would you not want to be successful? And in many cases, if there are consultants out there that don't want to do DEI, don't do it because you're helping me. I'm just going to do it in a different way because I'm going to take on humanity as it is. And we are meant and hardwired to be together. We're meant emotionally to be empathetic and tied to each other. And why would we do things intentionally to mess with that bond and that network that we are already as humans have in us?
Yeah.
And so it's almost anti-humanity
yeah,
to try to pull these things out of the workplace or the social structures because we're meant to be in community. That's what made humanity successful. You can't argue that point biologically, scientific. I mean, it's hard to argue that point.
A-
yeah.
Absolutely. I completely agree with everything that you both said. Um, is it, let me ask, like, do you feel like sort of what contributed maybe to some challenges around DEI or politicizing DEI had to do with maybe some of the approaches that like trainers took when they were maybe leading and designing diversity training? Because I remember when I was like working on my dissertation, and just because of the subject matter of my dissertation, it was not it was not the organization where I collected my data for my dissertation. So let me just say that. But I was in another diversity training class, and let's just say like the trainer essentially. I mean, I don't know why I'm trying to like be delicate, but essentially made some people feel bad, right? It's like, here's what's wrong, and it's all your fault, right? Like it was almost like it was a release of all this like pent up aggression, sort of. And so I wonder, and I remember thinking at the time, like, this is not an effective way to
No.
really like train people. But I'm wondering, like in your minds, do you feel like that maybe contributed to that
Oh
a little
yeah,
bit?
oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'll let you make the connections here, but if ever any group is marginalized and they are given voice, finally, they will use it to scream.
It's true.
And so this is the hard thing about the whole topic, because if you really believe in integration and the DEI principles and so on and so forth, not the superficial stuff, but the real depth of what Isaac just said. It's about humanity. And that's really what it's about, all humanity. And if you really believe that, then we have to pay attention to, we actually have to appreciate people who, even those who irritate the heck out of us, or even those who have a different belief from us. I mean, it's you have to practice it unilaterally. You can't practice it in parts and pieces. It has to be, like Isaac said, I love the way you put that, Isaac. It's all about humanity. And it's the fact that we're all walking on this planet together and trying to navigate it together. And by the way, right now, with a huge backload of fear, because everybody's scared to death about what's going to happen. And I don't just mean government stuff, I mean
Mhm.
weather, all kinds of things.
Yeah,
And I think people are operating a lot from fear. And when people are operating from fear, they're not at their best.
I
No,
completely agree. I
I
I
think
was
uh, I,
wondering. Sorry, go ahead, Isaac.
I was gonna make one. I think one thing to pick up on what is being said. I think the DEI component left out the team and how it's practiced. Because I think, to your point, Laurie, it gave people a space to scream, but it didn't give people a space to cry and to
Yeah,
hug
right.
and to get come together. And
Or
I
to
always
hear.
to hear
Yeah.
each other. And I think as a one of the things I use as a common metaphor is like I was an athlete, a student athlete. Maybe we clarify that, a student athlete, and the team is something so precious that I can't really explain to people unless you played on a team. I did not like all my teammates. I did not philosophically agree with all my teammates or their families or where they came from. But you would be hard pressed for me to see my teammate in any kind of trouble on or off the court that I would not help
Yeah.
because that is my teammate, regardless of what they say. And I try to encourage organizations to really try to build in a team concept to understand that regardless of your different ways we got to each other, we are with each other now. And to stay and to improve and to grow, we have to be with each other because when we do it together, it's just more productive. It's just better outcomes. When we do it bifurcated and separated, it just leads to less powerful outcomes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we have to really try to instill the idea that difference is not is not dissonance, it's connection. It's a great opportunity to add diversity to your talent pool. You
Yeah.
can't have a team with all centers. You can't have a team with all guards. You need everybody in different positions. The same with any
Doing their
team and
thing. Yeah.
organization. Doing their
Yeah.
let them do their thing. And we
Yeah.
support that. You ain't gotta even like it.
And this is what's going to shift, I think, in the workplace, is people are going to have more choice about what they want to do, or else they're going to keep pushing back even harder.
Mhm.
Because we've been
Um,
trying to fit people into a box, and they don't fit into a box.
No, we
Not
don't.
neatly anyway. So quick, just a quick sort of yes or no answer. So when we think about all this stuff that's happening, right, and like all the things and all the pressure and all of the events of the world and expectations in organizations, like, is it possible to be, productive in this environment, like carrying all this weight? Because I don't, I mean, it's difficult to say the least. So maybe yes or no, but is not the appropriate like answer choice for that. But like, I don't know. I don't really think it is. I think it's going to be hard to sort of be your best. With
I
what's happening.
think the answer to that is not yes or no. I think the answer to that is we better do it.
Mm.
We better
I
figure out a way.
And,
And we're
and
incredibly industrious. Human beings are incredibly inventive and industrious. So I think we can, if we will, and if we'll do it together.
and
Isaac, quick.
yes,
All right.
and it requires us to do our internal work first before we
Awesome.
Oh,
ask of other people.
It's a
excellent.
perfect,
Excellent.
perfect way to end this. We're dropping some knowledge today. Thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Laree. Thank you, audience, for tuning in to this inaugural episode of Organized Chaos, the show about all things organizations. And as we be sure to join us next week, where we actually pick up this conversation and examine some more dimensions of of organizational life. So we'll talk about strategies for success. We'll look ahead at what's really going to be necessary for organizations to be successful. I am Jeremy Michael Clark. Thank you for your time. And I like this outro beat that we actually cannot hear right now, but when it gets added, you'll hear it. So we'll let that
Okay.
beat right out, Matt. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you.